History, they say, is written by the victors. Yet some stories disappear into the cracks, silenced by shame, indifference, or deliberate erasure. This is the story of one such group. This mixed-race population, born from French colonial soldiers of African descent and German mothers in the Rhine, which was occupied by the French after World War I. Their story emerged from the ashes of World War I, only to be caught in the crosshairs of another, even more insidious war, the Nazi regime's quest for racial purity. The products of these mixed-race relationships were attributed the pejorative term the Rhineland Bastards, a term as loaded as it's revealing. Their story relegated to a footnote in the annals of World Wars I and II history. It speaks to the enduring legacy of the colonial mindset, the insidious creep of racial ideology, and the human cost of turning a blind eye to injustice. Over the next few chapters, we will journey into the heart of their experience, navigating the terrain of their origins, their persecution, and the lack of recognition by the Allied victors of their victimhood to such an extent their stories weren't deemed worthy of audience at the Nuremberg trials. We will unravel the tangled threads of history, exposing the uncomfortable truths that many would rather forget. This story is a reminder that history is not a distant echo, but a living presence, shaping our present and demanding we confront its uncomfortable truths. It also underlines the importance of resisting the forces that seek to divide, dehumanize, and persecute. It is a forgotten story that certainly must be told. Rhineland Bastards. The very phrase jars the senses, its harshness echoing the brutal reality it represents. A term born out of prejudice and enforced with violence, it encapsulates the stigma these children inherited from birth. They were not granted the dignity of individual names, individual stories. They were lumped together, defined by their perceived illegitimacy and the colour of their skin. This label, however, tells us more about those who wielded it than those it sought to demean. It lays bare the deep-seated racism that permeated German society in the aftermath of World War I, a racism that intersected with the humiliation of defeat and the economic anxieties of the time. The presence of these children, a visible reminder of Germany's World War I defeat and the presence of French colonial troops in the Rhineland, became a convenient scapegoat, a target for displaced anger and fear. Their very existence challenged the carefully constructed myth of Aryan purity, a myth that would fuel the Nazis' genocidal agenda. Their story forces us to confront the insidious power of language, how words can be weaponized to dehumanize, to otherize, and to justify unimaginable cruelty. The story of the Rhineland Bastards is not confined to the history books. It reverberates in the present, a haunting reminder of the enduring legacy of racism and discrimination. Their experiences, though specific to a particular time and place, speak to universal truths about power, prejudice, and the human capacity for both extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary resilience. By delving into their story, we gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of identity, belonging, and the search for justice in a world often hostile to difference. We are forced to confront uncomfortable questions about our own societies, our own biases, and the ways in which we continue to grapple with the ghosts of the past. The echoes of their struggle can be heard in the ongoing fight for racial equality, in the movements demanding recognition and redress for historical wrongs. Their story reminds us that the pursuit of justice is a marathon, not a sprint, and that the fight for a more equitable future demands constant vigilance and unwavering commitment. To understand the emergence of the Rhineland Bastards, we must first journey back to the waning years of the 19th century, a period marked by the rise of European colonialism in Africa. Germany, though a latecomer to the scramble for Africa, staked its claim establishing colonies in present-day Namibia, Tanzania, Cameroon and Togo. This colonial enterprise, fueled by greed and notions of racial superiority, set the stage for the tragic events that would unfold decades later. German colonial rule was characterized by brutality and exploitation, African land and labour were ruthlessly appropriated, and indigenous populations were subjected to forced labour, discriminatory laws, and violent reprisals. This period witnessed horrific atrocities, including the Herero and Namaka genocide in German Southwest Africa, a chilling precursor to the Nazi horrors yet to come. The seeds of prejudice sown in the distant colonies soon found fertile ground back in Germany itself. Racist ideologies propagated through propaganda and pseudo-scientific theories began to permeate German society. Africans, portrayed as primitive and uncivilized, were cast as a threat to the purity of the German nation, a narrative that would have devastating consequences for the Rhineland Bastards. Section 2. A World in Flux. The First World War shattered Europe, redrawing borders and leaving deep scars on the continent's psyche. Germany, defeated and humiliated, faced economic collapse, political instability, and a profound sense of national trauma. It was in this tumultuous period, amidst the ruins of war, that the seeds of resentment and xenophobia took root, creating a climate ripe for scapegoating and the rise of extremist ideologies. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, added salt to Germany's wounds. The treaty, widely perceived as unjust by Germans, imposed heavy reparations, territorial losses, and strict limitations on Germany's military. This fueled a sense of national humiliation and resentment, a potent brew that would later be exploited by the Nazis. In the aftermath of the war, the Rhineland, a region on Germany's western frontier, was occupied by French troops, among them soldiers from France's African colonies. This occupation, deeply resented by many Germans, would have unintended and tragic consequences. The presence of these colonial soldiers, a visible reminder of Germany's defeat, would become intertwined with the burgeoning racism of the era, giving rise to a new target for hatred: the children born from relationships between German women and African soldiers. Section 3. Children of the Occupation. The presence of French colonial troops in the Rhineland, a source of deep resentment for many Germans, had a profound impact on the social fabric of the region. The soldiers, hailing from various African colonies, including Senegal, Morocco and Algeria, found themselves in a society grappling with defeat, economic hardship and social upheaval. Amidst this turbulence, relationships developed between some German women and African soldiers, relationships often born out of necessity, wartime liaisons or genuine affection. These relationships, though largely hidden from public view, did not go unnoticed. The children born from these unions, children of mixed heritage, became a visible embodiment of the complex dynamics at play in the occupied Rhineland. They were living reminders of the war, the occupation, and the intimate encounters between colonizer and colonized. The birth of these children, however, was met with mixed reactions. While some were accepted into their families and communities, many faced prejudice and discrimination. They were often referred to as Rhinelandkinder, Rhineland children, a term that carried with it a whiff of scandal and shame. These children, caught between two worlds, became easy targets for the rising tide of racism and xenophobia that swept through Germany in the years following World War I. As the Weimar Republic crumbled and the Nazi Party rose to power, a sinister ideology began to take hold in Germany. This ideology, rooted in pseudo-scientific notions of racial purity and racial hygiene, viewed the Rhineland Bastards with particular suspicion and disdain. These children, with their visible African ancestry, were seen as a threat to the Nazis' twisted vision of a racially pure Germany, a stain on the fabric of the Aryan nation. The Nazis embraced the dangerous and discredited theory of eugenics, a belief that certain races and individuals were genetically inferior and posed a threat to the health and purity of the nation. This ideology, fueled by racism and a warped sense of social Darwinism, provided the justification for a series of increasingly draconian measures aimed at controlling reproduction and eliminating those deemed undesirable. The Rhineland Bastards, caught in the grip of this poisonous ideology, found themselves increasingly marginalized and demonized. They were labeled as Mischlinge, mixed race, and subjected to discrimination, ostracism, and violence. Their very existence challenged the Nazis' carefully constructed myth of Aryan supremacy, making them targets in a campaign of hate that would have devastating consequences. Life under the Nazi regime was a nightmare for anyone deemed outside the circle of Aryan purity, but for the Rhineland Bastards, the experience was particularly harrowing. They were subjected to a relentless campaign of discrimination and persecution, their lives upended by a regime determined to erase their very existence. The Nuremberg Laws, enacted in 1935, codified the Nazis' racist ideology into law. These laws stripped Jews of their citizenship and prohibited marriage and sexual relations between Jews and Germans. While the Rhineland Bastards were not specifically targeted by these laws, they were nonetheless swept up in the Nazis' web of racial hatred. Their lives were constricted by a web of discriminatory regulations. They were barred from attending certain schools, holding certain jobs, and participating in many aspects of public life. Many were denied opportunities for education and employment, forced into menial labor, or left to fend for themselves on the margins of society. They lived in constant fear, their lives overshadowed by the threat of violence and the ever-present gaze of the Gestapo. As the Nazi regime tightened its grip on power, it became increasingly clear that discrimination was not enough. The Nazis were determined to eliminate what they saw as a threat to the genetic purity of the German nation, and they turned to a chilling solution: forced sterilization. In 1933, the Nazi regime passed the law for the prevention of hereditarily diseased offspring, a law that would have devastating consequences for the Rhineland Bastards. This law allowed for the forced sterilization of individuals deemed to be carriers of hereditary diseases, including mental illness, epilepsy, and physical disabilities. While the law did not explicitly target racial minorities, it was applied in a discriminatory manner, with the Rhineland Bastards disproportionately targeted for sterilization. Doctors, acting on the Nazis' racist ideology, often classified these individuals as mentally deficient or socially unfit, using flimsy pretexts to justify their forced sterilization. Thousands of Rhineland Bastards, many of them young adults or even teenagers, were subjected to this horrific procedure, robbed of their reproductive rights and their dignity. Despite the pervasive atmosphere of fear and oppression, acts of resistance flickered amidst the darkness of the Nazi regime. The Rhineland Bastards, though targeted and marginalized, found ways to resist, to assert their humanity, and to carve out spaces of dignity and defiance. Some Rhineland Bastards found solace and strength in faith communities, seeking refuge in churches and religious organizations that offered a measure of protection from the Nazis' racial hatred. Others formed underground networks, sharing information, providing support, and helping each other navigate the treacherous landscape of Nazi Germany. Acts of resistance, though often small and hidden, were nonetheless significant. They represented a refusal to be defined by the Nazis' hateful ideology, a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable cruelty. These acts of resistance, though often overlooked in the grand narrative of history, serve as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and humanity can endure. The Allied victory in 1945 brought an end to the Nazi regime and its reign of terror. But for the Rhineland Bastards, the fight for justice was far from over. The Nuremberg trials, convened to hold Nazi leaders accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity, offered a glimmer of hope, a chance for the world to bear witness to the horrors inflicted upon them. However, the plight of the Rhineland Bastards remained largely invisible on the world stage, their suffering relegated to the margins of the historical narrative. The Nuremberg trials, while a landmark event in international law, focused primarily on the most egregious crimes of the Nazi regime: the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of European Jews, and the waging of aggressive war. The forced sterilization of the Rhineland Bastards, though a horrific crime rooted in the same racist ideology, did not receive the same level of attention or scrutiny. This lack of attention was due in part to the complex political realities of the post-war era. The Cold War, emerging from the ashes of World War II, cast a long shadow over international relations. Germany, divided and occupied, became a focal point in the ideological struggle between East and West. In this context, there was a reluctance to delve too deeply into the nuances of Nazi Germany's racial policies, particularly those that might have implicated the Allied powers or exposed uncomfortable truths about racism within their own societies. In the decades following World War II, the Rhineland Bastards continued to carry the burden of their past, their experiences largely silenced and forgotten. The German government, focused on rebuilding the nation and coming to terms with the horrors of the Holocaust, was slow to acknowledge or address the injustices inflicted upon them. The silence surrounding the plight of the Rhineland Bastards was compounded by a number of factors. Many of the victims, traumatized by their experiences and fearful of further discrimination, were reluctant to come forward and share their stories. Others had internalized the shame and stigma associated with their mixed heritage, making it difficult to speak out and demand recognition. Furthermore, the German government, while acknowledging the horrors of the Nazi regime, often downplayed or ignored the specific targeting of the Rhineland Bastards. The forced sterilization program, though widely condemned, was often framed as a misguided attempt to improve the health of the nation, rather than a deliberate act of racial hygiene rooted in racist ideology. This reluctance to fully confront the past had a profound impact on the Rhineland Bastards, denying them the recognition and justice they deserved. The Rhineland Bastards, labelled as bastards, mischling and undesirables, were denied the basic right to define themselves. Their identities were stripped away, reduced to a single, dehumanizing label. Yet despite the Nazi regime's efforts to erase their humanity, they persevered, clinging to their dignity and their stories. Their experiences underscore the enduring power of identity, the importance of self-definition in a world that seeks to categorize and control. The Rhineland Bastards, though subjected to a relentless campaign of discrimination, never fully internalized the Nazis' hateful ideology. They found ways to resist, to maintain their sense of self, and to pass on their stories to future generations. Their resilience serves as an inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of oppression, the human spirit can endure. Their story challenges us to embrace the complexities of identity, to celebrate diversity, and to create a world where everyone has the right to define themselves on their own terms. The story of the Rhineland Bastards is a story of suffering, resilience, and the enduring human spirit. It is a story that demands to be told, not only to honor the memory of the victims, but also to educate future generations about the dangers of intolerance and the importance of fighting for justice. By remembering their story, by acknowledging their pain, and by learning from their experiences, we honor their legacy and contribute to a more just and equitable future. Their story is a reminder that the fight for justice is never truly over, that the pursuit of equality demands constant vigilance and unwavering commitment. Let us remember their story not with bitterness or anger, but with a determination to create a world where such injustices are never repeated. Let us honor their memory by building a future where diversity is celebrated, where all people are treated with dignity and respect, and where the sins of the past are never forgotten. To help us bring more interesting and informative content to you, free of charge, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share the video among your contacts. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.